morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dave Crouch, and this is the Williamson Inc. Town Hall meeting, and we're most happy to have those of you who are here with us and listening on the air. We always enjoy this and like to find out what's going on Capitol Hill. We've got a couple of empty seats here so far this morning, but what I'd like to start off with this morning, we've got Dr. Janet Smith here. She is the president of Columbia State Community College. And Dr. Smith, if you could just give us an update on what's going on with Columbia State, but particularly as it relates to the Williamson campus and what we might expect to see and hear over the next few months.
All right, I'd be happy to. I'm standing up, sit down, I'm real short, so this is supposed to be short with me up here. The guy's supposed to be here soon, but it's always a pleasure to talk about Columbia State and what's going on, and particularly Columbia State and Williamson County. I know all of you know what's happening in terms of Dr. Shauna Jackson, and she's heading off to Nashville State to be the president there, and I can't say we're just very, very proud of her. She has done a yeoman's job here, and she's going to do a yeoman's job in Nashville. And so we look forward to a long working relationship. We see this as a positive for Williamson County and a positive for Nashville, Davidson County, and around, in that we can work together on new and many projects. So we're in the process now of the search for that particular position, and hopefully we'll have it filled soon and have someone that will be on spot and moving us forward just as she did. We have made a little bit of change to the position. It was an associate vice president. We've moved it up to a vice president for the Williamson campus and external services including workforce, apprenticeship, and internship, and co-ops, which is a very strong portion of what Shauna has been doing as well in connection with some of our other faculty. So we are moving forward very timely with that so that we do not lose any ground or any of the momentum that has been started here. In way of other news, you may or may not have heard, the American Association of Community Colleges is a national association of which community colleges belong, and each year at their annual convention, there are awards given. Columbia State is a finalist for 2 awards. One is Excellence in Diversity, and the other one is Excellence in Student Success. So we are very excited that not only this year were we identified by the Aspen Institute as one of the top 150 community colleges in the nation, but now we got 2 other national awards that we're looking at. So we're very excited about that. Getting ready to have graduation, 2 commencements. Again, we have outgrown the number of students that will fit in our gym, so we have a early morning commencement and an afternoon commencement, our largest graduating class ever. So awesome. Just many good things going on.
Well, we certainly have Dr. Smith to thank for this beautiful new campus here at Williamson. I know at least 2 previous Columbia State presidents had worked really hard trying to give Williamson County a campus like this, but with you and Representative Charles Sargent as a team, y'all got it done, Dr. Smith, and it's a beautiful campus, and we appreciate you having us here.
Well, thank you. It's all done through partnerships, everybody working together. So this is a community college, it's a community building, and the community built it. So thanks to everyone.
Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Take care. That worked out just right. Jack, we're glad you could join us. This morning we also have with us Senator Jack Johnson, our State Representative Glen Casada, who is our majority leader at the House now, and Representative Sam Whitson. And we're glad to have you gentlemen with us this morning, and looking forward to what we can learn about all the many things you are juggling down on Capitol Hill this week. Again, Charles Sargent is not going to be able to be with us this morning, again, taking cancer treatments, and this is his day to do that, and we wish him well and hope that he will be back with us soon. Understand he looks good, seems to feel good. He's working 4 days a week down on Capitol Hill, so he's certainly representing us well And Charles, we thank you for that if you happen to be listening. The first of all, gentlemen, if you could, whoever wants to, give us an update on your schedule, when the budget will be discussed, when you are now anticipating adjournment. What's the time frame looking like right now? Jack?
We have a scheduled adjournment date of April 13th, and if the House doesn't slow us down, we'll hit that. Committees are starting to shut down. I adjourned my committee, the Commerce and Labor Committee, last week. This week on Tuesday. We had a long meeting and wrapped up our calendar, so we're shut down for the year. Several other committees are starting to shut down. The governor has submitted his budget amendment, which typically comes about this time of year. The governor submits his budget when he does the State of the State, and then, but that doesn't contemplate, obviously, revenue numbers for, say, February, and so there's some updated revenue numbers, and so there's a budget amendment that comes in, and that's been submitted to the respective finance committees, which Glen serves on. I do not. I'll let Glen talk about where things are in the finance committee, but I'd say we're probably, in all seriousness, still probably second or third week of April,
yeah.
I say, is when we should be ready to shut down.
And the House is usually slower than the Senate because we read the bills and we spend a lot of time studying the topics and before we vote. No, seriously, the House has a different layer of committee system that we have, that the Senate doesn't, and they're much more efficient. But the House, we're looking at the voting on the budget Thursday, probably Friday, the 12th or 13th, and then we'll come back Monday and take those bills that are behind the budget on Monday and Tuesday, and we think we can adjourn on the 17th. I think you guys heard Speaker McNally talk about being done maybe the 13th. So they'll finish, they'll pass a budget, they'll finish up, they'll recess waiting on us, and then we should finish up that following Tuesday, the 17th.
And how much do the taxpayers save for every day you are not there?
It's quite a bit. It's in the neighborhood of $60,000, $70,000 a day. Yeah.
Press on.
So press on. That's exactly right.
That's great. Appreciate the update there. Sam, have you got anything to add to that?
Other than our transportation subcommittee shut down, like they said, and we're starting to see these as people's bills move on up to where they go to finance ways and means subcommittee. They kind of go in behind the budget, and we wait till we get toward the end there before they move out.
Right. Good. Just going down the list of issues, I went back to our last two sessions or editions of the town hall meeting and looking at some of the issues that were discussed that first week. The juvenile justice reform was kind of the top of the governor's priority list. Give us an update, Glen, if you will, give us from the House side of the fence.
There was, and the bill in its original form had a great outcry across the state of Tennessee from the juvenile judges, some DAs, and I want to mention a couple of people on the House side. And the Senate was quite involved as well, but on the House side, the chairman of criminal, his name's William Lamberth out of Gallatin, sit down. He and several of the attorneys in the House sit down with the judges, sit down with a couple of DAs. We've come up with something that the governor likes and the judges are. So at this point, from the House perspective, everybody likes the little tweaks, and it'll be moved to the House floor and it will pass.
Jack?
I'd say the exact same posture in the Senate.
We've got a guest with us this morning, juvenile judge Sharon Guffey. Judge Guffey, if you could you give us any, I guess I could have given you a warning.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But tell me from your side of the bench, what you think the state Senate, state House can do to make your job more efficient, easier, or make it easier on the kids in the system. Any ideas from your perspective?
Well, I can tell you in terms of the legislation, this is a huge piece of legislation. It's over 50 pages and has major changes to juvenile justice. And we have been collaborating closely with the governor's legal counsel. They've been very receptive to all of the concerns that the judges have had. Because it's a different way of doing business with juvenile justice that is going to take some time to implement. And so I think that we're all trying very hard to work together to make those changes. I understand there's going to be a committee to follow this next year in order to additionally tweak any changes that might need to be made, because it's expansive.
What are the problems we're trying to fix?
It's not necessarily problems, it's how you more effectively deal with delinquent children in terms of your treatment and rehabilitation, which is what juvenile court's all about. And how you do that effectively without punitive measures, such as, locking them up has been a big piece of this legislation. So, and that's difficult in so many ways, and it's hard to get into because it is so complicated in just a small forum like this. But we're working on it. We're trying really hard.
Well, we know you are here in the county, and gentlemen, we appreciate it. Thank you, Sharon.
And Dave, I say, Judge, if there's some things, I can tell a little hesitation on your part, and if there's things in its current form, we would love to sit down with you, and I knew that, yeah, and thank you, because that's a labor of love.
Tough things, and one, I guess I just got demoted. The thing I like about our sessions here are we kind of get the backstory on a lot of things and find out that they're a lot more complicated than they seem sometimes, and appreciate your helping us understand that, Judge Guffey, and hope you guys can get it all worked out. Again, very tough subject. Another one that the media is having a big time with, Senator Johnson, is the Airbnb bill, so to speak. Tell us what the latest is on that and where we are, if you will.
Well, we finally moved a bill out of my committee on Tuesday dealing with short-term rentals, and I have to give you just a bit of background to get a full understanding of the issue. This is something that's been going on for really 2 years up in the General Assembly and with local governments and so forth. And the issue we have is Nashville, the city of Nashville, Davidson County, is the third largest short-term rental market in the U.S. And that's due to a number of reasons. One, it's a very popular tourist attraction. And there's a shortage of hotels in Nashville. Now that's being corrected. If you've been downtown, you see there's a lot of cranes, a lot of hotels being built down there. But it's very difficult to find a hotel room in Nashville. And if you can find one, you better be prepared to grab your wallet because it's going to set you back. And so it was really kind of a perfect storm, I think, for the emergence and the popularity of short-term rentals. This is where you, as an individual, you can rent out a bedroom in your home. Perhaps your kids have gone off to college or something and you want to supplement your income a little bit, and you can post on Airbnb, HomeAway, VRBO. There are a number of sites, and literally have people come stay in your home. And there's background checks, and there's ratings on people, and it's just become tremendously popular. Perhaps many people are either watching or in this room have used short-term rentals. And so that's one of the reasons there was such an emergence of popularity. So back a few years ago, the Nashville Metro Council, and I don't mean to single out Nashville, this happened in Memphis and Knoxville. Cities have been kind of trying to decide how they want to deal with this. And smaller cities like Brentwood and Franklin have enacted ordinances relative to the use of short-term rentals. And what Nashville did, they put in a process where you could do it, but you had to be permitted. You had to go to the city and get a permit. You had to pay taxes. You had to pay a fee. You had to go through a process in order to have a short-term rental. Let me digress for a moment and say there are really two types of short-term rentals. They're what are referred to as owner-occupied. That's where you live in the house, and maybe you're renting out a bedroom, you've got a spare bedroom, or maybe you've got an in-law apartment, or some type of an in-law suite or something, and you rent that out. And people are making pretty good money doing this in some instances. And then there's non-owner occupied, and this might be where you had a rental house and maybe your renter moved out, and rather than rent it long-term, you use it as a short-term rental. Maybe you inherited a house from a grandmother who passed away or something, and so rather than sell it, you put it on Airbnb, and you let people come stay. Another thing that people do, in fact, I have a good friend of mine who lives in East Nashville. He and his wife, during CMA Music Fest, when CMA Music Fest is going on, he and his wife go on vacation to the beach in Florida, and they rent their house out, and they get $3,000. And it pays for their vacation. So this is the type of thing that is happening that technology is helping us with in terms of, they call it the sharing economy. And that's where you have excess capacity of something. It might be time, it might be your automobile, and so you drive with Uber or Lyft. It might be that you have excess capacity in your home, and so you want to rent it out or make some extra money. And it's really pretty exciting. Perhaps you want to do small jobs and chores with an app called Tackle. There's all kinds of things that are taking place in this economy. So Nashville put a process into place for these people to do it, and it became very popular. Well, for whatever reason, they changed their mind a few years later, and in earlier this year enacted an ordinance that was going to shut down and phase out all of the non-owner occupied short-term rentals. Well, we have case precedent going back all the way back to the 1930s, when the state gave land use and zoning authority to local governments. And keep in mind, local governments have no authority unless it's given to them by the state. And the state did give land use and zoning authority to local governments back in the 1930s, but when they did so, they were very careful to protect non-conforming use. Not to get too far into the weeds, but that just simply says, if Glen Casada owns and operates a gas station in downtown Franklin, and Franklin subsequently comes in and says, we're gonna rezone that area of town and not allow gas stations, they can do that prospectively, but they can't shut Glen down because they changed their zoning. And this is the same issue we've had relative to short-term rentals. And Nashville had a process. People got the permit. They were lawfully operating. They obeyed all the rules. They followed all the rules, and in some cases invested significant amounts of capital. And then the city wants to come in and change the rules and shut them down. And that's what we've been grappling with. Now, Brentwood, that wasn't an issue. Brentwood banned any rental less than 90 days in 2009 before any of us had ever heard about Airbnb. So there was no one lawfully operating in Brentwood. Similarly, the city of Franklin has had an ordinance in place for a number of years that allows short-term rentals in some areas and not in others. Now, so the bill that we passed simply says this: a city can do anything they want to do prospectively relative to short-term rentals. You can ban them, you can allow them in some areas and not other areas, but if someone was previously lawfully operating, you cannot shut them down. That's what we passed out of my committee. Now, you can shut them down for being a bad actor. You can have an ordinance in place that says if you have noise violations or trash or parking or things like that, they can revoke your permit for cause, but there has to be a due process in place. So for those, you hear all the nightmare stories about the bachelorette parties going on, or loud music or things like that. Well, if that's happening, those people will get shut down, and they can no longer lawfully operate. So I feel good about the legislation we passed. It protects every ordinance that is in place in Williamson County. They don't have to do anything or change anything. It's not going to affect anyone. But for these larger cities, like particularly Nashville and Knoxville, to a lesser extent Memphis, again, they can do anything they want to prospectively. But if someone was lawfully operating, and believe it or not, there are a lot of people in Williamson County that own properties in Nashville that they use as Airbnbs, and they have to be able to let them continue to operate. So sorry for the long answer. I tried to condense about 2 years of negotiations and discussions on a very complex piece of legislation into that period of time. So it's headed to the Senate floor, then it'll go over on message calendar to the House. I hope that they'll concur with this, or concur with the Senate action, and I think it'll be good policy moving forward.
Just so you'll know, there's probably no one in the state of Tennessee that knows more about this subject than Senator Johnson, because it just came through his committee, which he chairs this past week. And
yeah, well, and we've had a lot of input from a lot of conversations with our mayors and our city managers and a lot of folks at the table, and even some of the folks from Nashville that supported the original ordinance. I think even if it's somewhat reluctantly, they have to concede that this is probably pretty good policy moving forward, and consistent with the way we've handled land use and zoning for almost 100 years.
now, does the hotel industry have any interest in this bill?
Well, they do, but I don't. I love the hotel industry, but their opinion, let's just say they don't like the competition, and technology has moved their cheese somewhat, and they have been very aggressive in lobbying local governments across the state trying to get short-term rentals banned. And I don't mean to assign a malicious motive to them, but in many respects, I think one would have to admit it's because it's anti-competitive.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is part of the backstory on that issue, and we always like to dig those out if we can. So, moving on to the opioid crisis, it seems like the conversation on opioids has moved from Nashville to Washington. Is there anything still going on here in Tennessee, Glen, regarding the opioid?
Yes, we've actually got a really good bill. Initially, the Department of Safety, the governor came out with a very strict bill as far as managing what's dispensed and how it's managed. The healthcare community of the state said, guys, this is not going to work. And so, again, I want to give a kudos on the House side at least, and I know the Senate's been quite involved. But the chairman of the health committees have sat down with the Doctors Association, surgeons, pain management doctors, and come up with a really good bill. So we're going to be bringing something to the floor on the House side and the Senate as well that I think is going to make a difference in address and greatly reduce the opioid addiction in the state. I'm kind of excited about what's coming down the pike.
Can you give us a piece of the legislation that would make the difference?
Yeah, well, number one, there is strict controls in place. If you go in and you're suffering from pain, you go to the emergency room, just as an example, you can be dispensed up to 5 days of an opioid for the relief of pain. But what's changed in the past is you've got to come back in 5 days to get a refill, to get re-examined. And then once a doctor deems you need a redose, then at that point on, either you go under the care of a pain management doctor, or you don't get, your prescription doesn't get refilled. And so what it does, it brings accountability to the use of that drug.
Good. Sam?
Yes, we just passed that legislation out of the Health Committee full this week, and I'm a member of that committee. And one of the concerns that we heard from a lot of our constituents was that, listen, I have a chronic pain condition, and the governor and their staff has recommended those who are suffering from chronic pain can continue to receive the medication they need without being cut off later on. So there's some compromise in there. Like Glenn said, the main thing we want to do is to keep people from getting addicted and help those who have chronic pain, but also set up a process where if you go to the dentist, you'll get a 3-day supply of opioids to keep it from, used to, you get a longer list. So there are procedures in place to address that, and it left the Health Committee and be moving up to the floors.
Hey, Dave, let me say this. Sam has spent hours, it's probably uncountable hours on hammering this thing out, and he's owed a great debt of gratitude for his hard work and help putting that together. So thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Sam. Has the medical marijuana issue gotten intertwined with this at all, or is that a separate issue?
Well, it was in local,
in criminal.
It was in criminal sub this week, or full committee this week, I believe. Full committee, and it did not. They ran out of time. It will be addressed next week, Chairman Lambert's committee, and so it made a little bit of news this week, and so we'll be watching it next week to see if it moves out of there.
I was
Yeah, it's one of the fun things I get to hear as majority leader is when somebody's bill doesn't pass, they come storming into my office and say they weren't fair. And the bill is even watered, at this point in the House, the bill is even watered down even more than when it was originally presented. So as it will be debated next week it's just increasing the number of indications that you could use the oil for. Mm-hmm. And so, but I don't think it's got a chance in the Senate. I don't know, Jack.
Yeah, it'll be heard in the Senate Judiciary Committee whenever it's taken up, and I don't know exactly when that will be. That committee will shut down probably this coming week or the following week. So if it's going to be heard, well, it will be heard. But I don't know what the prognosis is. It's going to have a bit of an uphill climb in the Senate Judiciary Committee, but I don't serve on that committee.
I was amazed last week to find out that one of my clients, just Sunday school teacher, just straight as an arrow citizen, is buying marijuana for her husband who's got issues. And I went, really?
If I could just share a quick story. I was, for some reason, the speaker, and I think the majority leader had a hand in this. They appointed me to the medical marijuana task force last year. And it was a very interesting and informative committee or task force. But I was talking to a group of citizens over in West Nashville, a ladies group, about the legislative process. And this little lady that reminded me of my grandmother came up to me and said, I need to talk to you, Mr. Whitson. I said, what you have? And she said, no, we need to talk outside. So we went out to the parking lot. She looked around, says, I just want to let you know I smoke 3 or 4 joints a day. And I'm looking at this lady thinking, my grandmother, you know, and I go, ma'am, where do you get it? She said, oh, it's easy if you want some. I said, no, I don't. And I said, why do you smoke 3 or 4 joints a day? And she goes, it keeps me from drinking. And so
you never know.
You never know. So
you never know. School shootings. That issue is not going away, gentlemen, and it seems to continue to be pressed not only by the traditional opponents of guns, but now we got the kids marching and pushing for some type of legislation. What are we doing about it?
I'll take the first stab at this. Again, we have the legislation coming through the House and the Senate on, and of course everybody's heard about the governor has introduced $30 million to tackle this issue. One thing I discovered talking to several groups, we talk about a lot of Republican versus Democrat issues, but I'm finding this is more of an urban versus a rural issue. I have a friend, a colleague on the House floor. He represents 5 rural counties. They do not have a single SRO in any of those schools in his 5 counties. We're blessed here in Williamson County. We have SROs. I understand they're going to fund 8 more SROs. And the legislation set through some on your committee the other day waiting to present. One thing I was glad to hear is the legislation will carry that SROs cannot be replaced by armed teachers. That's, again, I'll say that the legislation says SROs will be prohibited from being, or will not be replaced by armed teachers. So, and if those school systems or LEAs who have SROs, they will not have armed teachers. And it's permissive. And then there's training requirements for those. So really, my friends on the rural side, they're facing a different issue than we are facing here in Williamson County, and we got to keep that in perspective. I have not made up my mind on how we're going to do this. I just want to make sure that this is not a process where we start replacing our SROs as a cheap way to provide security. And also, there's another part of it, not just the arming part of teachers, but also we got to look at the physical security aspect of this. How do we make schools safer? With the entrances, the glass, the doors, and so it's a lot more to it. But some of the notes I had here, there's approximately 900 SROs currently in the state of Tennessee. We have 1,400 schools. Some of those schools have multiple SROs, and it would take $61 million to fully fund SROs statewide. Is one of the notes that I was given. But again. when they started this a few years ago on a test program, or in a couple counties, the Tennessee Education Association deferred on this because of the challenges these rural schools face. So we'll see how it goes. I just want to make sure my teacher friends know they will not be forced to carry a gun. Some people claim, some of the teachers have told me that. Trust me, 26 years in military law enforcement, you cannot force someone to carry a gun if they don't want to. So it's more to come.
Right.
And I'll say, starting at the 30,000-foot view and going down, the governor's got some, that we've already talked about, juvenile justice. We've got some, we're sending a lot of resources and money and effort on the intervention on mental health. But the rural guys, as Sam well pointed out, came to us and says, we don't have SROs in our schools. Response times in a Wayne County or a Johnson County is somewhere, sometimes double numbers, 10, 11, 12 minutes before a deputy can get there. And so a bill came out of committee that says that if a school system does not have an SRO, then if that school system chooses to, and if any teachers choose to after training, they can carry. And I think the sponsor of the bill says, I'm tired of reading about teachers using their bodies to protect their students. And so it kind of tugged at our, and so for those up on the committee that want to give those rural counties that have no SROs, they want it. Their teachers want it, the systems want it, and so it came out of committee. It's something that 17 other states currently do. 15 of those states, staff can carry. It's in the state of Tennessee, our college professors can carry in the classroom. Our private school teachers in K-12 can carry. And so it just seemed like a logical step for those communities that don't have the officers that want to carry to protect their students. It just seemed like a logical step.
Right. Senator Johnson?
Well, I want to reiterate, because Glenn and Sam did an outstanding job, and I've not had a vote on any of this yet, but it is making its way through the process. The key word here is permissive. Permissive. Okay, what we're doing is we're granting authority to an LEA to do what is best for their community. And the media, you know, it's a sensational headline. The legislature votes to arm teachers. That's not what we're doing. We are granting authority to the local education authority to work with their teachers and their parents and their law enforcement to come up with what is best for their community. And it's much like the voucher conversation that we've had many times up here. We don't need vouchers in Williamson County. We've got outstanding schools right here in Williamson County. But we as Williamson counties should not deny or refuse to provide options for other districts across the state, because you know, Perry County school system is much different than the Williamson County school system. And so what we should do is we should empower, within reason, these LEAs to do what they think is best for their schools and their community. And we're, as Sam said, we're very fortunate here in Williamson County. Every school has an SRO, and some are about to get a second SRO. But there are schools in the state of Tennessee that have no SROs. Not only do they not have SROs, they got 3 deputies patrolling the entire county. And so when there's an incident, you know, it could be 15 minutes before anyone arrives there to protect those kids. So if those districts think it might be wise to take a teacher who is a retired law enforcement officer and allow them to carry a weapon or have a weapon under lock and key in their room, why would we deny them the ability to do that, which we already allow them to do that? Or what if it's someone like Sam, who's retired military, who has extensive training in the use and handling of firearms? Why would we deny a school the ability to allow that particular teacher, because they have a unique set of skills to help protect that school? And if we don't have that option, I can tell you there are lots of teachers in Tennessee that have done so much hunting and outdoorsman type stuff that they are extremely skilled in the use of a firearm. I will tell you that. And so why wouldn't we have a process in place to allow those districts, if they decide and that community decides it's best for that school to help protect those kids,
to allow them to do it. And so that's what we're doing.
And it's also not just all or nothing SROs or armed teachers. They're also looking at options too, where law enforcement comes and spends the day in schools that do not have SROs or armed teachers. So they're working up some ideas on this too. So it's just not either or right now.
And one last thing, David. Obviously, that in having dozens, if not hundreds, of conversations with constituents here in Williamson County and other people across the state, we do have to look at, when you look at the Parkland situation, the system broke down. Okay, that young gentleman was a very troubled individual, and there were warning signs all over the place. And I'm not casting aspersions on law enforcement, FBI, anything. They can do those internal investigations and help try to figure out why the system broke down. But certainly we have to continue to look to find ways to keep people like that, who are obviously very, very disturbed from having an ability to obtain a firearm.
Agreed. Mr. Casada, you pictures in the paper this week about a child marriage ban for kids
Yes.
under 17.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about the.
I number one, had no idea that children, upon the consent of a judge or the parent, could get married at that young age of 12 and 13. And I use 12 because in the past 16 years, there was one 12-year-old married, two 13-year-olds married in the past 16 years. The bill came to the committee, and we, in a parliamentary procedure, put it aside because I quite honestly, did not believe the sponsor that children were married in the state. Well, the next day, we researched, and I came up with those very numbers. 71 children between 2001 and 2017 under 16 were married. And so Monday, we immediately pulled the bill back to committee, and we passed it out of committee. So we're sending a bill to the House floor that will ban child marriage. If you're 17 and you have the consent of your parents, you can still marry. That's where, and a 4-year age difference. So a 17-year-old could marry a 21-year-old. The other thing is with the immigration we have in this country, we're also going to stop forced marriages at any age. And that's a custom with some cultures that are coming into our country. We're going to stop that in Tennessee as well. So I'm proud to be the one that pulled that thing out of the parliamentary limbo and send it to make sure it gets to the floor.
Right. Judge Guffey, do you have any wisdom to add to that subject?
I've not performed any marriages.
You know, Dave, if I could say, that's part of the bigger war that we're fighting on human trafficking too, and sex trafficking. In the United States, about every, I think, 2 hours, average age of a 13-year-old girl is sold. They're treated as products, not persons. And so this is, I had an opportunity to join TBI in a sting operation last year in Williamson County. 20 adult males were apprehended thinking they were going to have sex with a 14-year-old girl. It is a problem. It's the second fastest growing criminal activity or industry right behind drug trafficking. And so we had that. We also passed a tax to go into a strip club. It's a $2 tax on that. That money will go into a fund to combat human trafficking. We passed that on the floor, recently, and it will be going up for the governor's signature. So this is just part of one battle of a bigger war that we're conducting.
Right. Just for our listeners on the radio and on Channel 3, Judge Guffey did say she has not performed any marriages. That was her response a minute ago, so I'll put her on the record there. The city of Franklin has had a couple of issues here recently that have been attracted the interest of the mayor and the board of mayor and aldermen. One of which is the building design standards, and then another bill regulating things that can go in the Harpeth River. Tell us what's happening, Jack.
Well, I'll take design standards because there was a development on that just in the last few days. This is a bill that came up last year that was brought by the Home Builders Association for Tennessee, and it would have limited a city's ability to require consistent design standards in a neighborhood. and this is something that Franklin has done and other cities have done as well. I fought very hard against the bill, as did the rest of our delegation, but it had momentum, it had traction, and quite frankly, the bill was targeted at Franklin. And it had a Senate sponsor from Knoxville, and I think the House sponsor from around the Chattanooga area. But it was targeted at Franklin because Franklin, can be somewhat strict in terms of their requirements, but they're doing something right, I guess, because people really want to live in Franklin. And so I used an example, Dave, and you actually got brought into it because you and I are next door neighbors. And let me explain the bill this way. Dave lives next door to me and has 15 acres, I guess. 14 acres. And so
servants, yeah.
Well, it's cows. I mean,
We're going to do an Airbnb there.
For cows.
Yeah, for cows. Yeah, he's going to do an Airbnb for heifers. So this example came up in one of the many meetings we had. But let's say that Dave's property. I have no idea what it's zoned, but let's say it's zoned A2, which I think would allow one home per 2 acres. So as it stands now, if Dave wanted to develop that 14 acres and put 7 homes on there, he could do so, and if it's properly zoned. But in the city of Franklin, the city would say, okay, you can do that, but we're going to make sure that the homes you build on there are consistent with the other homes in the neighborhood, okay? And I asked the very question. I said, now, if this bill passes, which is targeted at Franklin to limit their ability to control design standards, then my next door neighbor could put 7,000 square foot homes with no garage, made all vinyl siding, which is totally inconsistent with our neighborhood. And the home builders looked at me and said, well, yes, that's what the bill would do. And I said, well, I have a real problem with that. And then they used the argument of, well, but your next door neighbor has property rights and he should be able to do whatever he wants with his property. And I said, well, what about my property rights? Because I don't, that would devalue. And I think that kind of resonated with them. Another good example is, many people in Franklin would know, is on West Main, the old funeral home that had, I think, 4 or 5 acres there as you're heading out towards the admin complex. And that property was developed, and they went in and added, 4 or 5 homes, on that property, whatever it is. Again, with Franklin's design standards, that property was allowed to be developed, but the homes had to meet the characteristics of the surrounding neighborhood. If this bill had passed, then the developer for that property could have built ugly, contemporary, funky looking houses that did not match the neighborhood. And so that's why the bill was problematic, but it was being pushed by the home builders. And but the Senate sponsor of that bill told me on the floor literally yesterday that she is going to take it off notice. And so that bill is dead for the year.
It made it to calendar rules, was getting ready to go on the House floor, and Representative Casada and crew sent it back to committee, and I think it will never come out of committee again. But this does not mean it's going away. We'll probably have to fight this every session because we built just, I think, in Franklin, 1,400 homes in 1 year. The sponsor, they built 6 homes in his district. So it's a lot of money involved. And the real issue here is not so much the cost of the material for the homes, it's the cost of the land. Our school system drives up the cost of the home because people want to be here. So, and I hope you have a chance to ask me about our judicial redistricting issue that we're working on, have a big impact here also.
We're going to, I don't know if any of you have ever seen Jim Cramer's show, but he has a lightning round where it's about 10 seconds or less answers on numerous other issues here. So let's do a lightning round and do a 10 or 15 second summation of what's going on with the courts, Sam.
Real quick, we passed it in the Senate, understand, and in the House, the 21st Judicial District, we authorize right now 4 circuit court judges. We're going to try to obtain, I think we will, funding for a fifth, and we'll create 2 circuits within the 21st Judicial District. I'm going to take more than 10 seconds because in our district, or in our judicial district, we have Lewis, Perry, Hickman, and Williamson County. Williamson County has dominated the election and selection of judges for years. We'll make 2 circuits, 4 judges in the 21A circuit, and 1 judge representing Lewis, Hickman, and Perry County in Circuit 21B. We get the funding for that 5th judge. The comptroller says we're 1 judge short in our district, so we hope to get that through. That will eliminate the backlog of court cases, we hope, in our county, and particularly where divorces or like corporate takeovers or bankruptcies. It's very complicated in Williamson County, and we hope to help Lewis, Perry, and Hickman.
Right.
Thank you.
Back to the Harpeth River. Anything going to happen on that issue?
No, it did get out of a subcommittee, and I met with the chairman of the Ag and asked him to not act on that bill this year. I don't think the legislature is a proper course to handle that, and so it's dead in the House.
Great. Education funding, the BEP enhancements that you all were trying to.
Yeah, still working on that. And again, Charles is our kind of the tip of the spear on trying to get that additional funding. And so that process is just kind of now beginning to decide what will get funded and what won't get funded. So we'll have more to report on that probably at our next meeting. But it's certainly still alive. We're still working on it, and it's just imperative. I know I've said this time and time again. We believe it's so imperative that we get additional money for capital outlays, for capital funding in Williamson County, and we're just really not getting a fair shake in the current BEP formula. So we're continuing to fight that battle.
Very good. Sam, you're kind of the lead on the emissions testing issue for our group. Is that not right?
Well, I have not seen the legislation on it yet. I think it's still in committee. I don't know.
Still in committee.
Yeah, it's not coming through transportation, and so I've not seen the details on it. So I'm not the lead on it. No, I'm not. So, but we'll see when it happens. We got to make sure there's not a price tag from the federal government attached. If we do away with that, it could end up costing us more to implement than we think. So,
what the media reported was that there would be no counties, the outlying counties around Metro would not be allowed to contract with the private contractors for the testing, that it would have to be done by the EPA.
Again, that has not come through my committee. I have not studied that legislation.
We'll get into that next month. HOV lane, where did that come from?
Well, the federal government gave the state money to build an HOV lane. It's not being enforced. Actually, it costs, as many of you see, I tell everybody I live 20 miles and 2 hours away. That's why I leave at 5:30 in the morning, so I can use the HOV lane by myself. And so, but Representative Curcio, an incredibly great young man, that represents Dixon and parts of Murray County. He has carried that legislation to add an additional fine or informational fines to encourage people to correctly use the HOV lane, but also encourage people to operate outside the hours of HOV enforcement so we can alleviate some cars on the road. But we'll see more action on that later on. Don't know where it is or where it will finally come.
Well, I'll make my way back here to the audience and see if we have any questions back there. Senator Johnson, if you would, the Chancery Court issues, is there any way to explain that issue and what's being done in a short time?
I'll do my best. Briefly, I had filed a bill that would move all appeals relative to the Uniform Administrative Procedures Act from Chancery Court in Davidson County to Chancery Court in Williamson County. I was asked to file that by some business interest. As it is right now, those cases are all heard in Davidson County. I heard from some judges, one in particular, that did not like the idea of having that additional workload brought down to them in the 21st Judicial District. They're overworked as it is, so I promptly decide not to move forward with that bill. But
So you could go home at night.
yeah,
Who would that be?
I don't know. But what should happen with that? It is a problem because the Chancery Court type appeals under the UAPA are all heard in Davidson County. They should really be heard in the locality where the matter originated. I think that's probably the best course of action right now. There are many in the business community who believe that there might be some bias against the business community in Davidson County where those cases are heard.
And in Williamson, it went out in that fashion where the county of origin is where it will be heard. So
Yeah.
that's what's come out of the House.
Yeah.
Good. So, thank you, gentlemen. Questions? Your name?
I'm Jack Elder, and maybe you mentioned it, but the bill regarding arming and our staff, teachers and our staff, where exactly is that in the process right now?
And on the House side, what has come out is a bill that lets schools, or LEAs, number one, they vote, do they do it or do they not? Number two, if a LEA votes to adopt this policy, the teacher has to go through training. And number three, and most importantly, it can only be in an LEA that does not have SROs. And so I'm going to be a little redundant, but there are some counties in the state that are 12 and 15 minutes, literally 10 and 12 minutes from, right. So it came out of a committee. Yep.
And then on the Senate side, it's still in committee. It's in the Judiciary Committee. So.
Yeah.
And the sponsor is also working with the governor on see what impact that $30 million one-time allocation will have on that legislation. There may be some changes as it moves through the system.
Right. Other questions from our audience? Everybody's shy this morning.
There's one in the back.
Wasn't looking back.
Candidate.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Chad Story. So last month we had talked about the BEP augmentation, the bill that you're working on. You said there was multiple counties that would be affected and would be receptive to that idea. Any idea of the temperature since then? I know you're still in the works, but the temperature in the rest of the counties and what it looks like?
Yeah, it would impact a number of districts across the state, and obviously the members, the senators, and the representatives from those effective areas, counties, school districts, are supportive. But I want to be clear, it has a significant fiscal note. It's a big price tag. Don't hold me to this. I want to say it's 18 million or something like that. And then it's recurring because it goes on year after year after year. So I think we could philosophically get the bill passed, but when you got a bill like that, it's A, does it make sense from a policy standpoint? I think we can overcome that hurdle. But then B, we got to find the money for it. We've got to be able to fund it. So that's going to be the tricky part. But
Yeah.
We're working hard to try to get that done.
On the House side, Charles and I and Sam and I calculated some 34 legislators would benefit financially from this bill. But remember, that means 65 see no benefit to them, and we're taking a pot of pie of $18 million that they would like to spend other places. So it becomes a factor of money, which is a very limiting factor on the state capitol.
And not to belabor the point, but you also need to remember, just like we've been able to get for Williamson County schools some one-time money. Okay, that's just okay. We're going to give you this money this 1 year. The bill Charles and I have would be recurring, meaning that, which is important for the district because they can plan. You know, they can count on getting this money this year, next year, and the following year. As a backup, we want the recurring money, but as a backup, we'll certainly continue to fight to try to get some one-time money for it, or maybe a combination of both.
Right.
Something of interest also, I just, on the House floor, I just want to let everybody know, James K. Polk is staying in Nashville. He'll not be moving to Columbia in the near future.
That's great. We've got a couple of Franklin aldermen with us this morning, and I just, Miss Ann, I wonder if you or Scott have any advice or suggestions for our state delegation this morning from the city of Franklin.
No advice, but just keep us in mind all the time because sometimes things seem to be specifically pointed at Franklin recently.
And you would prefer that they don't do that. Scott Speedy?
I would say keep those Improve Act dollars coming our way.
That's it?
Transportation, infrastructure.
I'll say to that, Williamson County is getting more than our fair share from I'm on the more rural, more on the east end of the county. Highway 96 widening is a really big thing. I know these guys have projects they're excited about, but I'm really excited about the widening of 96.
And just in the 65th district alone, we're getting $215 million worth of projects that's authorized under the Improve Act.
Well, did you ever lose your train of thought? I have about 15 things running through my head this morning, but a couple other things. We've got a little bit more time, and one that I did mean to touch on is the Tennessee Attorney General selection process. Jack, are you involved in that?
I am, and it's a very important issue and something we've discussed for a number of years. You know, Tennessee, well, I think we're the only state that selects our Attorney General the way we do, and the Attorney General in Tennessee is selected by the Supreme Court. In many states, they're popularly elected, just like the governor. We've had discussions, and there's the problem with that is that our Supreme Court justices are not elected. They're appointed by the governor, and then the Supreme Court selects the Attorney General. So there's no direct accountability for our Attorney General back to the electorate. And this is our state's lawyer. This is who decides when we enter into lawsuits against the federal government, who defends laws that we pass before the courts. It's a very, very important position. And I would challenge how many people, I'm not going to see a show of hands, who can even tell me the name of our Attorney General, okay? And that's somewhat problematic. So we have a constitutional amendment that is under first consideration, so it's a long process to amend our Constitution. Some people would like to see our Attorney General properly elected. Others don't, because they think that AG stands for not Attorney General, but aspiring governor. So people run for Attorney General and then immediately turn around and run for governor. So the constitutional amendment that's before us now would say the Supreme Court can continue to appoint the Attorney General, but then that appointment must be confirmed by the General Assembly. And so that's one idea that's on the table. Another is to select our Attorney General the same way we select our Comptroller, our State Treasurer, and our Secretary of State. And that is by election by the General Assembly. At least at that level, you're only once removed from the electorate, because we're elected by you all, and then we select the Attorney General. So, but I think what's probably gaining the most steam on the Senate side is to allow for the Supreme Court to continue to select the Attorney General, but then they have to come back before the General Assembly for confirmation.
And that idea is being pushed by Ken Yeager on the Senate side. He called me yesterday and asked if I would shepherd it through the House. So I'll be taking what you all send me through the House.
And Mac Hatcher got delayed again. Is that the?
Yes, and I'm probably understand there's still a right-of-way issue the city is working with the resident, but I've been assured it's still on the one-year plan, and it will stay on the one-year plan.
Just keeping the pressure on there, guys. So we appreciate all you all do for us, and particularly being with us every month, give us an update. And gentlemen, we really appreciate your participation in the town halls every month. Got a lot of folks that we have to thank for making this show happen, not the least of which are the Emblem Apartments, who are now providing us with pastries and coffee every morning. So if you would like to join us live, lots of good things to eat and good coffee to have before the show, about 7 o'clock on the mornings of the show. So ladies, we appreciate your providing those to us. The sponsors of our show, Lynn Maddox over at Vanderbilt and Christine Bradley, we appreciate you all. AT&T helps out. Aspen Grove Asset Management makes sure it's heard live on WAKM. And Creed Henderson and Heather and Lance are the team from WCTV. Obviously, it couldn't go on the air without them, and we really appreciate the extra effort y'all are making to make it happen here at Columbia State. Thanks to WAKM and Tom Lawrence. The chamber staff puts in a yeoman's job every week or every month to make it happen. Now led by Kel McDowell, Behind the scenes, Nancy Conway is, as we all know, nothing happens in Williamson County that Nancy doesn't know about, and we appreciate her help in keeping us aware of things we need to know. So thanks again to Columbia State. Appreciate all of you being with us. Look forward to having you back. And I do have the official calendar. Our next show is on April 27th. And I've been mixed up on the dates a few times this year, but officially it's April 27th, right, Kel?
Yeah, we'll be done.
Yes, it will be back to the last Friday. Yes.
Great. Look forward to having you back with us then. Thank you very much.
Fine.